let's go to the second part here because this is equally important and kind of gets to the whole cover-up situation. Can't say you weren't warned here on this show. Let's put it up there on the screen. The judge, lo and behold, has denied Donald Trump's request to release the Epstein transcripts in Florida. This is the grand jury transcripts that are relating to the Epstein case. You'll remember previously that they had said, quote, that the court said its hands were tied because she could not release the files from the grand jury convene because transcripts are, quote, typically kept secret except in very narrow circumstances, and that the department was not requesting the transcript for use in a judicial proceeding, which actually would have opened the pathway to disclose the jury records. So, I mean, this is where a lot of the ways that these, you know, a lot of the way in which they even like said that they were going to request the transcripts, it was obvious basically from the beginning that it was almost certainly likely to fail just moving through the court system. It just gets to this whole fakery about what the Epstein files are. Like, it's in the IRS, in the Treasury data, and inside of the FBI, which you have executive purview. You don't need no judge to release any of that. You can release all of it yourself if you want to. Look at the MLK files, right? You can release all of this data, 302s, et cetera, for the public interest. There's direct, you know, there's executive purview for all of this. You have that ability today. You don't be putting this on some judge, and especially here, the grand jury documents, part of the reason why I said even that would be dramatically insufficient is that those grand jury documents and transcripts are specifically about the narrowly tailored charges against Epstein, which only involve him and the sex trafficking allegations against him. It doesn't get to any of the broader implication. Senator Ron Wyden, who, by the way, you got to give credit to, the guy's been working on this story for multiple years now at this point, so, you know, long before it was convenient, he literally said, I personally looked at Treasury documents which show $1.5 billion in suspicious activity reports that were filed after Epstein's death. $1.5 billion in wire transfers from the richest and most powerful people in the world, also connected to sex trafficking rings all across the world, including Eastern Europe. That fits with the New York Financial Services document. The government has it in its ability to release that those documents today, if they want to. Where is it? You know, this is what I'm getting at in terms of they're trying to fool the public with stunts like this. And it genuinely is very important for people who are interested in this to be able to parse and say like, oh, Trump tried. No, he didn't, okay? This was guaranteed to fail basically from day one. And, you know, it's a stunt. There's no other way to put it. It's a stunt.
And you know what? If they had pulled this stunt first.
Then fine.
Then, no, not fine, but I think people would have bought it more.
I think you're right.
Would have been like, oh, we're trying and the courts are standing in our way and these liberal Marxist judges, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, there's still a question of whether the grand jury transcripts from Manhattan will be released, but that judge has also already said basically like, my hands are tied unless they provide additional submissions and rationale for why we would do that. So listen, this is very, very, very unlikely to happen. And even if it did happen, what it would provide would not be the quote-unquote Epstein files. But, you know, the Ron Wyden thing is actually really important. And this is the thing that Julie K. Brown, who has been, you know, focused on this case down in Miami for years and years at this point, this is what she always says. I heard her interview with Ross Douthat over at the New York Times. She said, I've always insisted that the government has tried too hard to rely on the victims to build the case instead of following the money. She's like, if you really want to know what was truly going on here, follow the money. And that's why the Ron Wyden piece is so important.
I've said it here too. And that's why it's so preposterous. The money is the center of the Epstein story because that's where the arms trafficking stuff comes in, his connections with Maxwell, all of his fake wealth, the Leslie Wexner stuff. And it's because of the money, and it's because of what I believe is his work with these intelligence assets is what leads to the sweetheart deal of the non-prosecution. It's not that the government was running the quote blackmail ring or whatever. It's not the government was, you know, running his sex trafficking operation. It's that when he got in trouble for that, they're like, all right, guys, we're gonna help this go away. There are documented instances of this going back, you know, for decades. Multiple times CIA officers and others have been let off for sex crimes because they don't want to release sources and methods. The actual financial documents and others, I believe, would show a vast array of sketchy financial transactions, which have basically no other explanation other than intelligence work.
Where did all the money come from?
Well, yeah, exactly.
And who did it go on to?
Who did it go to?
And for what purposes?
And for what purposes? Why was it all offshore? You know, why did all these banks just look the other way? This is the story. And yeah, you're right. I'm glad that Julie K. Brown continues to beat that drum as well, because that is the beating heart of why you're allowed to get away with everything. And also, I think that's what would implicate way more. And this is where, look, I mean, no offense to Donald Trump, but he's not actually even all that wealthy compared to the people who are actually.
He is now.
I was going to say
he is now.
But at that time, that's when he's filing for bankruptcy and all of that, dealing in the 1980s with the Atlantic City and all that. He didn't actually have the chops to be dealing at the highest levels of global finance. The people who did, they have a lot to lose if those files come out.
I think it was Mark Epstein, Jeffrey's brother, who said that Trump always wanted to fly on Jeffrey's plane because he wanted to save the gas money. Yeah, so, you know, I think probably the 7 times on his plane is probably an understatement, because remember, they were basically neighbors in Palm Beach, lived like a mile away from each other. And then, you know, obviously they were in Manhattan together as well. So, a lot to pull back there. Trump says, though, Saagar, this is all going great for him. And his approval rating has never been higher. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
We've achieved incredible things in a very short period of time. And in polling released just last week, it was announced that the approval for congressional Democrats under Hakeem Jeffries has reached the lowest ever recorded, 19%. And Republicans are doing well. And I have the best numbers I've ever had. You know, it's amazing. I watch people on television. Well, what about Donald Trump's polling numbers? Yeah, they're the best numbers I've ever had. And with this made-up hoax that they're talking about, my numbers have gone up 4 and 5 points. They want to do anything to get us off the subject of making America great again. And we're not going to put up with it. And remember, don't let them forget, it's so important, Obama cheated on the election. Look, the camera just went off. Obama, the red light just went off. Can you believe these people, how bad they are?
So obviously his approval rating is not going up, although it is important to parse these things, because the polls that have come out so far do show that with his base, his numbers have stayed the same or gone up. Correct. I mean, all within the margin of error, but he certainly hasn't fallen off with like Trump supporting MAGA base, self-identifying Republican voters. His numbers haven't fallen off at all. If anything, they have actually gone up. But Harry Enten broke down the numbers of how his approval rating is actually doing at this point overall. Let's take a listen to that.
Look, he started off back in January +6 points on the net approval rating, -3 in March, -7 in May, and now he's at a term too low at -11 points. His net approval rating has dropped nearly 20 points in the aggregate since the beginning of his presidency. He's underwater on all the major issues of the day. Trump's net approval rating on all the major issues, -5 points on immigration, his best issue. He's underwater. How about the economy? That was what he was elected for. -14 points. How about foreign policy? -14 points. How about trade and those tariff wars? -15 points. And of course, the Epstein case, the lowest of the bunch, -37 points. I do have one piece of good news for Donald Trump, and that there is one other presidency that has a lower net approval rating at this point than this one. The bad news is that it was Donald Trump's other presidency, his first presidency, net approval rating 6 months in. The worst was in 2017. Donald Trump was 16 points underwater. The second worst, however, is this Donald Trump presidency, 11 points underwater. The average president at this point since 1953 has a +27 net approval rating.
So there you go. That's the reality of where he actually is. I mean, with regard to the base numbers, I was talking to you a little bit about this before, but look, I'm sorry, the liberals were right. It is a cult, and I see this as sort of, whether it's an intentional or unintentional, it's basically a test for his base. Like, will you stay with me even as these sort of like core central mythology of MAGA and Trumpism, even as that is completely blown apart? And it does, it reminds me of the, you know, grab her by the P word moment. It reminds me of these like doomsday cults that, you know, the day that the world is supposed to end comes and goes. And you would think that faced with this evidence that like you've been lied to and this is all ridiculous and lo and behold, you're in a cult, that people would sort of snap out of it and go about their lives. And some of them do, but many of times what happens is they actually, because they've dedicated so much of their life and their being, their identity to this, they double down on it. And there's some rationalization of, oh, well, actually, God has given us another chance to recruit more members to our cause. There's some rationalization that's spun why it didn't happen this time, but now you have to believe even harder. And when you look at the numbers just among his base, that process is unfolding right now as we speak.
I don't disagree. I mean, I just don't think it's all that unique, I guess. I mean, it's one of those where, let's think about Russiagate, right? I mean, we're going to talk about Russiagate later, put the actual thing and all that aside. I mean, even after the release of the Mueller report, the vast majority of the Democratic base still believed that Russia stole the election and directly influenced the vote count in 2016. Bullshit, but they still believed it. If you look at the cult around a lot of political figures, Obama is probably a good example. I mean, you have somebody who literally ran on, well, I mean, I think his approval rating with the Democratic Party never suffered a significant blow up until the day that he left office. And in fact, his affinity at this point is still one of the highest within the party, right? And so, I mean, that kind of is unfortunately a deep part of the American system. But this is why I do think that the base argument is an irrelevant one, because the base doesn't matter. Bases always stick together. They always are cultish in their support of political parties. If Obama had the Democratic base in his pocket, or the Democrats had their base in their pocket, then they would have won the election. They did not win the election. Why? Because there are independents, there are other people who still vote, especially in these higher turnout elections, like presidential elections. And that ultimately is how Donald Trump came to the Oval Office. I mean, the MAGA base is not going to win you the state of Pennsylvania. The MAGA base is not going to win you Georgia. It's not going to win you Michigan. It's not going to win you Wisconsin. It's not going to win you North Carolina, Nevada. I could go on, or Arizona, right? It's the swing 2 to 3%. Go look at the margins in PA. It's not like it was a blowout. It was like 1% that he won the state. Those are the people that matter. I think this is an important moment for them, and that's part of why I get frustrated with the convo, because, yeah, political bases are by and large cults. Now, Trump, I'm not going to deny, okay, the guy is unique for sure. Yeah. Like within the context of politics.
The poll he has, I think Obama's probably the closest analog, but I still think Trump is unique about it.
In my lifetime, he's the closest analog. I'm trying to think about Reagan actually came pretty close in terms of his cult with the
It's hard for me to really, because I was young when Reagan and you weren't even alive. Yeah. So it's hard for me to like have a real sense of texture.
I've read about it. People should read the Nixon land books that kind of go into the rise of Reagan. It's important. I mean, he was the most beloved figure in the Republican Party before Donald J. Trump. Right?
Yeah, so, and I mean, I sort of feel like though his mythology was almost more after the fact, though.
In some part. I mean, he was still very popular in 1986, and he left. I'm trying. Actually, okay, let's put it this way: FDR. FDR is probably the most analogous example, or JFK is another one where even after he died in the 1980s, you'd walk into a Boston coffee shop or something, and there'd be a picture of JFK up there with a Saint medal or something like that. That's a cult, okay?
Yeah.
I mean,
JFK.
He was a martyr,
Catholics.
to his fair. Yeah, JFK amongst Catholics. I'm just saying that type of stuff is, I wouldn't say normal, but it rhymes throughout American history. But that's not enough to win elections. To win elections, you still have to appeal to a broad enough, base. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.